Hello and welcome to Gatekeepers. I apologize for the late start this evening on this episode as I had some technical difficulties and didn't hit the right buttons to start with. Tonight we're going to be talking about making the common undead a little more challenging. If you enjoyed tonight's content, please make sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoyed tonight's content, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to this channel and the channels in the video description. Without further ado, let's get into it, shall we? Hello, my name is Jaide, and this is my Tabletop Tavern. Joining me tonight is Shadow of Shadow and Sun. Welcome, sir.
Howdy, folks.
And joining me this evening will also be MarHawkman. Welcome.
Good evening.
Gentlemen.
All right. Now, we already kind of did our intros, in private mode because, again, buttons were misclicked and whatnot. So, but I'll be happy to do them again. How is everyone this evening?
Stellar.
Awesome. Flavy said he was watching the other stream, the fake stream. That's unfortunate. Well, things happen.
Cheer up, Mark. It's almost Halloween.
Oh, boy. Man, I've been finding new things to worry about over the last month, and I hate it.
Worry less.
Not on the news. You're probably better off.
Oh, yeah, I know. That, and I'm not even talking about seeing things on the news happening on the other side of the planet. No. That makes it worse. I'm talking about stuff that's, directly affecting me. Well.
You need to take some time, play some games, decompress. So, are we ready to talk about the common undead being not quite as challenging as they should be, or how to make them more challenging?
With one little small caveat there. I don't think undead are even remotely common. There's, in your fantasy worlds, I mean, your mileage may vary, but I find that those are kind of like, up there. They should be not rare as an occurrence, but it should be like, oh my goodness, this, everybody should be terrified of even skeletons. Think of all the classic Harryhausen movies where, the average crew, they're head back to the boat. We're noping out, but, from skeletons, shadows, zombies and ghouls and all that stuff, that is not something you see every day.
Sure, but I think they're used a lot in, especially fantasy tabletop gaming, and their stats in almost every book that I have seen, their stats have been lackluster. Like zombies are slow; they only get one action per turn. They're not really that terrifying. I mean, sure, they're a bag of hit points. They're not really a bag of blood, but just a bag of hit points.
I'm guessing you never played like first and very little second E. Is that a correct assumption?
That would be a correct assumption. I unfortunately did not have a game master who could run Basic Edition or First Edition, either one. And the one AD&D game I played did not last very long, and I've got all the books for it, but it just didn't last very long. So we never really got past, I think, level 1. In the AD&D game I played.
That might be the thing. See, for me, I was looking at like the questions earlier, and I'm like, oh my god, I undead are like the only thing scarier than undead are demons and devils in AD&D, and of course dragons somewhere in between the two, depending on the level or age of the dragon and the power level of the demons. Undead were just most total party kills in my experience were because of undead, or worse, they would be turning your characters into undead, whether it was strength drain, level drain, things like that, which I know they totally nerfed later on. Trust me, when a vampire is coming at the party and everybody, or or a specter, and everybody knows that if it touches you, you lose 2 levels. Nothing scares a party more than that. Especially at those levels when it's costing you like 250,000 XP for a level. The thought of, we might not be able to find an atonement spell and get our levels back. We might have to do this all over again. It is awesome. Awesome to see that those eyes just get big and wide and like, oh no, there's 3 vampires in the room. I'm out.
I mean, I can say from... Oh, go ahead, Mar.
Oh, I was just going to say that I've actually seen games where they really did have all negative stat changes like that genuinely be permanent. It was not something that was like ordinary stuff, though. That was, like serious, like, oh, hey, you got hit with the extra special attack instead of the regular attack kind of stuff. And people hated it.
And I can speak mostly... I can speak mostly to 3.5 and Pathfinder 1E because, again, those are the systems I have the most experience with. And zombies, ghasts, wights, even ghouls and skeletons are not really that dangerous, unless it's just been the fact that either our party was overgeared, overleveled, or maybe too many people compared to the number of monsters we were facing. I never really found them much of a challenge per se. Granted, they have a lot of hit points and they hit for a lot of damage, but they're very easily circumnavigated, oftentimes. So I've got a new person to the stream. Welcome. I have not seen this name before. You shouldn't be able to go toe-to-toe with every monster. There should be monsters like vampires that require planning to defeat. Absolutely. Monsters you basically have to ambush or attack at their weakest. I agree.
In one of the previous streams, I mentioned the idea of having monsters that are more of a hazard to be dealt with and not necessarily fought, because let's face it, the monster's not the objective.
Fair. So,
TCG, Lady, Six Nations, everybody, what's up, guys?
Yeah. So, I mean, why are zombies, ghosts, skeletons all relegated to being lesser challenges so often? That's question number 1 for me. Like, when I was thinking about this episode, like, oftentimes they are relegated to lesser positions. What are some things that game masters can do to make them more challenging? And that's kind of what I'm hoping to get some ideas about for tonight, or maybe even inspire others to have ideas about this and take it forward into their games.
Well,
so go ahead.
Which question are you going with first?
Let's start with why. What do you think is the most underused undead at your table? Let's start there.
The most underused undead.
Oh, that's easy. Banshee. Boy. Banshee is so tied to a specific sort of set of mythology, and for me, I just everybody they all have this preconceived notion of them, and I don't like using them because they're so tied to mythology. But you guys, you may have different things, because I literally run a crap ton of undead. Undead are probably my favorite go-tos next to like giant spiders, just because they're so freaking creepy. Goblins and orcs and kobolds and all the humanoids, they're so passe in my circles. They're it's like, come on, GM, can't you give us something little more interesting? I know you can work at it and try to make them. So for me, that's just not so much a thing. Half of them I don't even use. Like kobolds, I almost never use kobolds. I don't even put them on my maps, so to speak, just because they're I'll stick with goblins. They do the same thing. I can make my goblins clever and sneaky and into making traps and all the things that kobolds were kind of famous for. But yeah, I run a crap ton of undead, and there is literally no type of undead that won't make the players think a little more strategically.
The one that comes to my mind, and is something that I have seen used, but so rarely that the simple fact that someone actually used the idea is what made me remember it. Ghostly revenants of monsters you killed. It's one of those ideas that's just so rarely used. Like, oh, you killed the monster. It's dead now. You may continue with your quest. Oh, boy.
Okay. So I will say that the most underused undead monster at my table is very likely ghosts. Not a lot of parties have the right equipment to fight them because you need like magic or some such to be able to even touch them. Depending on, I'm talking like 3-5, but in games like World of Darkness, they can get very powerful very quickly for a party that's completely ill prepared for it. And it's just not something I put a lot of thought towards, is how to run ghosts and why my ghosts are there. I could use ghosts more often.
Well, one of the things that I've noted in games where I've used ghosts or seen ghosts, there's a very, very wide array of abilities that you can give to a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
So simply knowing that it's a ghost doesn't tell the party how to avoid getting ganked by it.
What do ghosts do in your experience? What's the base damage for you guys?
I believe it's strength damage.
Oh, see, that's why.
Well, I mean, strength damage certainly is an annoyance, because that is actually one of the things that Hyperborea does with them.
See, with the AD&D, it was age 10 to 40 years.
Yeah, that'll do it. Well,
yeah, a ghost, we're running. We'll go get a priest. We'll come back.
Or you already have a priest, because one of the Hyperborea games where we encountered a lot of ghosts, I was the priest.
Hey, what's up, Crispy?
So
yeah, see, that's what I like. I've noticed a running theme is undead seem to have been kind of nerfed in later editions. I mean, you tell the players, they age you 10 to 40 years, and if you're an elf or a dwarf, I'm just going to give you 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
You're human in 1 or 2 hits is now a skeleton,
or at the very least crippled by old age.
Yeah,
and that is something you can't just go to the magic shop and get fixed.
Well,
sorry.
Well, one of the things with a Hyperborea game that really, really made a ghost encounter so memorable is the fact that we come into this rather funny-looking room. We see this weird fountain in the middle of the room with a puddle of water in it, with various objects that look sparkly and magical in the water. So my character takes out a 5-foot-long pole and starts pulling things out of the water. Actually get several pieces of treasure that were rather valuable, and got to keep them, actually. But at some point in this, we ended up awakening the ghost that was possessing the pool. Then we had to kill it.
Well, come back soon, Goshen.
Okay. And actually, this one's a good one. Ghosts or reanimated monsters from in some form, always good. Yeah. So now that we've said what our least used is. Let's focus on what we do use and how we change it up for our tables. Now, there are ways we could go back and we will go back and look at some of our lesser used and maybe reconsider some of the things we can do differently with them. But for now, let's focus on what is your favorite common or lesser type undead to challenge the party. Mar, I'm going to start with you on this one. What is your favorite undead to throw at the party?
Just something to, have as cannon fodder enemies that you don't really expect to kill the party. Zombies. The, shuffling horde kind of zombies. Everyone knows what they are. Most people aren't scared of them. They're like, oh, those things. We have to kill how many of them this time? But,
what makes them your favorite?
Because of the fact that there's so many different ways you can justify their existence. I mean, yes, okay. Not every TTRPG setting actually allows for zombies. That's true. But there's a wide variety of options. I mean, like you can go with the Resident Evil scientifically engineered nonsense stuff, or just the old-fashioned necromancy. Either one,
Okay.
And of course, like plot significance. It's like if the bad guy is a necromancer, it's like, oh, hey, there's zombies over here. The bad guy must be that way.
What about you, Shadow? What is your favorite type of common or even lesser undead to challenge the party with?
Seriously?
Yeah.
It's right there in the name, man. Shadow and Sun. The sneakiness and they're essentially 2 hit die ghosts, okay, that drain strength. And when they're hiding in the floor and you walk into the room and they just grab your feet and oh crap, chill and strength drain. And now people are that's the most underhanded DM trick there is, okay, when it comes to a monster. I mean, because they just walk into it and suddenly, the fighters and anybody with strength bonus, they're now at a, not a negative, but at a disadvantage from what they're used to. But the way they can just, follow the party and wait till they go to sleep or hide in the shadows, meld with them, even do the Peter Pan thing, follow behind them, all kinds of just, creepy sort of, darkness oriented things. And then there's the shadow demon, which also a lot of fun. Still not the most terrifying monster, but when it comes to the low level, because they're only, like a 2 hit die monster. So you can throw them at parties from first level, maybe just 1 or 2 at a first level party, all the way up to higher level parties, even the 10th level party, and you throw like 30 of them at the player group, they're gonna be kind of scared. And that's what I think is so missing, is that in all the later editions, the idea of outnumbering the party to like 2 to 5 to 10 to 1 is just like, oh, that's not fair. Well, it's not supposed to be fair. You're supposed to occasionally bump into an army or a huge cohort of just nasties, and you can't think that you can just walk into every room and just start swinging and let the dice fall where they may. No, you could look into the room and go, crap, close the door quietly, get the hell out, go regroup and figure out what you're going to do. If there's anything you can do. I mean, sometimes, you can't do anything. You have to go back and get help or go around or avoid the encounter altogether, because there's literally no way in hell you're going to win that combat.
Fair enough. So for me, my favorite common undead is zombies. I love throwing the zombies at my players. And for the most part, I run the infectious type zombie. So the zombie virus that can spread, kind of like the Dread Wraith, where the Dread Wraith makes a bunch of smaller wraiths out of a city, or even a small village, and it just keeps spreading and spreading. Yeah, I think that started because I may have played a little too much of one particular video game back in the day, Resident Evil.
Yes.
And I always liked the concept that it was something that spread among people. It wasn't just people necromancers raising the dead out of the ground. It was very much it spreads, and it's a cursed affliction that keeps going.
There is a similar way of doing that that's nearly as scary in general, and sometimes very specifically more scary. The idea of a toxin that causes you to turn undead when you die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I've seen that used in some settings, and it's like, oh, the enemy threw a grenade at me. What kind of grenade was that?
Right. Especially if the party is not immune to disease, like that's a game changer right there. I do find that higher level parties can handle most skeleton, zombies, or even ghost attacks pretty handily. Like they just stop everything if it comes printed out of a book. So that kind of brings me to my next thing. Do you use the material as printed in a book or a manual or a magazine somewhere, or do you make it your own? So I'm going to go back to Mar on this one. Do you use what's printed in the book, or do you always tweak it somehow?
Well, the stuff that's printed in the book, I guess, is the best way to say. It feels to me like this is the starter stuff, and then you customize it a little to add your own stuff. But I would use both things just so that you have the normal stuff, and then hey, there's one that's a little bit different. I wonder what makes that one different.
Okay,
but yeah, it's like, because that's one of the things that people have mentioned in the past. So it's like, oh, it's a monster we've seen before. Boring. Yeah. So what does this one do instead of what the normal one does?
So would you say that when you run the zombie encounters straight out of a book or a manual, that the party doesn't seem to be challenged, or that the encounter somehow falls short?
Well, the thing I mentioned earlier about having the whole generic zombies is like most of the challenge with fights like that is the numbers game. And then you have your special boss-ish zombie who's not a generic mook, and is at least somewhat cool.
Okay. So what about you, Shadow? Do you ever run stuff straight out of the book, or do you make changes?
Like Mar said, I believe I'm going to use the standard stuff for a while, and then later on down the road they'll bump into, like, for example, vampires. There's standard vampires, okay, and you could have like lesser vampires, I suppose, or the master vampire, and then there's like spell casting vampires, like priests and wizards. Okay, huge difference in the way you fight them and in how you play them as the GM, what they can do to the party, how they're going to think, how they're going to react and strategize themselves, and how they're going to hunt. And I like to give the party a really good mix of the monsters out of the books. I rarely like to repeat things unless it's the same monster and they haven't defeated it, or enough time has gone by where, okay, you fought vampires, like 5 levels ago last year. Maybe there's a new vampire menace that they've come across now, but for the most part, depending on how well they did and how much they enjoyed it or how much they hated it, will determine whether I bring those things back again.
Okay. So for me, whenever I'm running my zombies, I never run the stuff that's straight in the book, even at low levels, or the beginning levels. I never send the standard zombie at my players. Everybody's expecting the zombie to be slow, or expecting the zombie to be boring, and to be done with it in 1, maybe 2 rounds at the most. Instead, I'm sending them fast zombies that can not only charge across the battlefield, but charge across the battlefield, and I've given them pounce, the ability to charge and get a full attack in of 2-3 swings. Granted, their ability to hit other beings is not great. It's not a high number, but it's still not, low numbers. So I'm still going to hit on average maybe 1 time, maybe 2 out of 3 times. So my players, they have gotten used to me running these fast zombies that also spread disease. But then, what do I do after that? Well, it's time to change the game. I mutate the zombies. I take them down the different directions that you've seen in different medias. I've got the boomer zombies that cover everybody with a thick bile or a thick, viscous liquid that helps spread the virus, but also brings more to them because of the scent. The Left 4 Dead zombies. I've used those. I've made every type of those in D&D 3.5. I've always enjoyed running them, and my party is always wondering when the next one's going to come around the corner. They never know a moment's peace when I send those kind of zombies. Only until they've dealt with the problem at its core do they ever feel a moment's peace or safety.
Well, like RPG Grandma said earlier, though, is that different reasons for zombies existing could give you different traits in the zombies. Like if it's a necromancer raising the dead, maybe some of the zombies, a necromancer put a little more MP into raising that particular one.
Yeah. And as far as things like games like Cyberpunk or even I'm going to say Starfinder or Dragonstar, you can have the nanovirus, the technology virus, where beings that are more cyborg or android than mortal flesh and blood beings, they get hit by a cyber attack, and it kind of turns their brains to mush. Well, suddenly that's basically a techno zombie, and you could do a lot of the same things and they all have special augments or some kind of unique thing based on the technology that makes up most of what they are. So I mean, there are multitudes of ways to use zombies in not just fantasy. You can go into the sci-fi realm and have these skeletons or exoskeletons that are being powered by some kind of AI virus that is effectively undead, and you might consider it, well, it's not really undead, it's technology. Well, thematically speaking, it's still technically undead. It's unliving. There's no life force there, and it's animated. Crudest definition, it's an undead. And let's see here. Is there an undead with an anti-magic field? Well, I mean, if in a technology game, yeah, you could definitely do that. You could have a zombie walking around with a radio jammer, or a skeleton walking around with a radio jammer.
I have actually heard of people running undead in games where a certain undead will just absorb magic from its environment, and you, as a person with MP, it can drain your MP.
Yeah. Let's see here. Just working my way through chat. So the next question I have is, do you ever blend multiple types of undead into the same encounter space, such as zombie foot soldiers with whites supporting them, or even ghosts to occupy fighters while a host of ghasts gang up on mages? Do you ever, like I said, do you ever blend multiple types of undead into one encounter? Shadow, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Oh, absolutely. That's I played a lot of like Warhammer Fantasy battles and things like that. And that's meat and potatoes. You've got your rank and file, skeletons, zombies, ghouls, gas, etc. And even ghouls and gas can be technically like lieutenants over skeletons and zombies. And then you need officers above them, wights, wraiths, specters, ghosts, banshees, vampires, liches, all the way to the top where you have basically your lich, probably riding on a Draco lich, and he's the head banana, so to speak. Unless it's like a vampire type army where you've got like this really powerful vampire necromancer who's just making all kinds of different undead to conquer the world or what have you. That's just, it's a ton of fun. It breaks up the monotony, and it also lets you develop sort of a rivalry or an arch nemesis type of thing at different points. Maybe that Ghast got away when they were early leveled characters, and that Ghast is still hunting that one player from time to time. You might see him peeking behind a tree, because Ghasts aren't they're fast, they're cunning, and they're probably always hungry. And when they maybe taking a bite out of somebody, maybe they want to finish that meal off, but they had to run away or something like that, or it got turned, but now it wants revenge. With things like gas and whites, and heck, even I actually maybe vampires, obviously, but I wouldn't use the non-corporeal bad guys that way, because then it's just like one day you just don't wake up because you've got to sleep sometime. I forget who said it earlier. And a ghost or a wraith or a shadow can just wait until you fall asleep, go underground, grab you from behind through the earth, and you're dead. Sorry, I hate to be a dick, but that's that is what would happen if there were such things, and they were out to conquer the world or spread evil or whatever. People would just wake up as undead all over the freaking place. And at nighttime you've got an entire town that's sleeping. Next thing you know, the entire town is now full of shadows or ghosts or wraiths or specters. Sorry, it would be too easy. And because it is a game, you got to be kind of fair and not do really obscenely unfair things like that. Every once in a while you gotta stick it to them and twist the knife, but that would be just too much.
What about you, Mar? Do you ever blend your different types of undead to throw out a party?
It just depends on what makes sense for the scenario. Because, maybe it makes sense to have a scenario where you see skeletons walking towards you, and then when the skeletons get to you, their shadows suddenly remove themselves from the ground. Or maybe that wouldn't make sense. Depends on what you're doing. Because, necromancers, if it's a necromancer, maybe he has intentionally decided he wants to have 6 or 7 different kinds of undead as his minions, just because different strengths and weaknesses of the different kinds of undead.
Shoring up defenses. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I often do combine my zombies with ghasts or even ghouls at times. And sometimes whites, depending on what what is in the area. Because I do a lot of thematic play where if my players wander into an area, everything is themed around that area. So if they know they're going to be in a graveyard area or an area that has recently put down a lot of people into the ground because of a plague or something, you better believe you're going to be probably facing zombies and ghouls and whites popping up out of those graves. Again, I don't typically use a lot of the incorporeal undead, mostly because of how I like to run them as being made. You don't get ghosts just all over the place. You get maybe 1, maybe 2 ghosts in a particular area, because how they died is as important as them dying and becoming an undead. So to me, a ghost is something with unfinished business. It has a purpose. It has a drive to see its goal completed, because something in its normal life prevented it from doing so, and it died before it could see its goal completed. That to me is what makes a ghost a ghost. So I like I said, I don't typically run them often because I don't find them that prevalent in the world, or in my worlds at the very least. Now, TCG, the Crafting Gamer, has a question. And this question is, do you guys ever have an object capable of bringing back entire armies of undead, like the Black Cauldron?
Yeah, they're called
who wants to
liches.
field this one? Oh,
They're
there
called
you go.
liches. But if you mean like an artifact or a relic, lich is an object. But yeah, I've actually had many an item from Orcus's rod from the old days, all the way up to other magic items that do that, as well as I have a famous blade out there that when it kills something, that's what it does. You're coming back, depending on what you were or what it was that it killed will determine what kind of undead it's going to be. You got to kill it, but in doing so, you killed a chimera. Well, it might be a skeletal zombie or even spectral chimera, and that doesn't guarantee it's going to work for you, and be your buddy. It might decide, oh, you killed me, well, I'm going to kill you right back.
Yeah. Let's see,
And feel free to steal that, guys. It trust me, it's a terrifying, cursed magic item.
Okay. What about you, Mar? Do you ever have an object or some kind of artifact that brings entire armies of the undead back?
That's one of those things where it's like, am I opposed to the idea? Not fundamentally. However, it's one of those things where the limitations that I feel need to be put on that have meant that I've never actually done that.
Okay.
Never even played in a game that had that, because the fact that's one of those things where it's like, okay, you have this thing. You are now one of the most terrifying people around. And oh yeah, by the way, that also makes you a target. Because I've actually played in a lot of games that had stuff involving necromancy. It's just not a toy that lets anyone become a necromancer.
Okay.
Are you sure it's not going to be two there, Grandma? 2 places in Hawaii?
It was Himalayas and Hawaii is what here, place in Hawaii, and then the other place listed was Himalayas. So I actually do also use artifacts at times to be my catalyst for undead, especially in large numbers. When my players have gone up against the large armies of undead, generally there has been something like a Black Cauldron at play, something at the center of the main foe's camp, so to say, or their forces. And this is mostly because the rules of the game system would not allow them to normally be able to control so many undead. But to hell with that. I want a necromancer to be able to control as many undead as necessary to get the party's attention. And if that means I've got to, raise an entire large town, into undeath, that's what me as the game master is going to do for the players. Because, one small little thorp of 10 people, the party probably won't get involved. They'll probably let somebody else handle it. It's generally been my parties have, run that way. But if I raise an entire town of 10,000, yeah, you better believe that the party's going to be like, we need to stop that, like right now. So yes, I do often allow or make some kind of artifact at the center of that where someone has gotten a hold of, and it's typically an intelligent item as well. something that has some kind of spirit about it that has corrupted an individual to use it in this way, either by possession or the Faustian bargain of power, or presumed power in this instance. Eventually, the individual is more than likely going to end up being fed to the artifact to continue its power or to get it to move from that location to somewhere else. So, all right, chat has been going nuts. Thank you all for chatting away in the comments here.
Well, one of the things that I like about the like classic like evil fortress trope for liches and necromancers is the idea that those weird decorations that you see by the dozens on their walls are actually magic totems that they use in order to increase the number of skeletons and zombies they can have raised at a single time.
Yeah. One of my favorites that I've seen in play is as far as liches go, it's not that they are raising a lot of undead, but they're experimenting on the dead, and they're making more flesh golems than zombies. So definitely like Frankenstein's monster, where the being has the capability of thought, but it lives a cursed life. And an immortal life.
What's up, Mac? Glad you made it to the show.
Or like that skeletal abomination thing I mentioned in the YouTube chat.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, hey, here's a giant pile of bones. I don't feel like making it into a normal skeleton. I'll just raise the whole thing and turn it into a horrific monster.
Yeah.
Damn, Kai.
Yeah, so, even Frankenstein, if you wanted to run a Frankenstein themed game, the like Frankenstein's monster,
like Adam's Wrath.
Yeah. I mean, you could definitely run it, and keep in mind, Frankenstein's monster, he's faster than humans, he's tougher than humans, he's stronger than humans. He is
because he was made from the best parts.
Yes, he is the perfect being, according to Victor Frankenstein. So, fighting something like that is not going to be easy, and it shouldn't be easy. And as a game master, you can make them move faster, have more attacks, hit hard, and take very little damage. And don't be afraid to do this. Don't be afraid to send to something that's nigh on unbeatable at your party, because your party can always run away. They can always choose life over fighting. And make it clear from the very beginning that, the thing they are facing is a terror to behold.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a total party kill because the player's ego thought, well, if it's in front of us, we have to be able to kill it. That has to be fair. And not only does that have to be fair, but that has to actually mean that we have the advantage. And I'm like, no, they're not dropping. Yeah, what do you mean? I did 72 points of damage to that skeleton. It's not dropping. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, even so, I've seen mummies pop up multiple times. I don't really consider mummies to be lesser or common undead. I actually consider them to be an uncommon or even rare type of undead. I have used them.
See, that's actually an interesting quirk with that, because the fact that it's like, oh, the Egyptian pharaohs were buried with dozens or hundreds of servants some of the time. Well, yes, but the servants weren't mummified.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, though? I do like the idea of having lesser and greater mummies. I think AD&D, that was actually kind of a thing. The original mummies were just kind of like the lesser, but then you'll come across, spell casting mummies. And, it's just a different form of lich when you get down to it. The fact that it's got the bandages and stuff to kind of and I always after a while that mummy, he's taking off those bandages. Okay, he's not going to be walking around for more than about 8 minutes with those bandages on. Why? They're not keeping him, around, so to speak. I was going to say.
I get the feeling you've seen Imhotep in action more than once.
Yeah, a couple times, and I like the idea of, using like the magic jar or possession with a lot of my undead to try to get back a body. They don't care whose it is at this point. If they don't find the right one, just give them time. Yeah. So they took over the barmaid and it was a dude. He'll deal with it for a little while. And then you know what? Next thing you know, he's the bartender. Next thing you know, after that, he's the captain of the guard. Stuff like that.
Oh yeah. The corpse taker type of undead can be especially terrifying because you don't know as a player character, they don't know if they're going to be the next corpse that the corpse taker takes.
And if you've got a really good friend in the party, you've been bros forever, one of those nights you're out drinking or something, it's just the two of you go, hey, I got this idea, man. You think you can pull it off and help me play it out? You're now the mummy, and if you play your cards right, you'll get your character back. But in the meantime, let's see what we can do.
Well, one thing that occurred to me when the discussion of mummies is that there's the old trope, because quite frankly, Egyptologists are like, hey, look, this is what we found buried in the guy's coffin, wrapped around his bandaged remains. Well, looking at that from a TTRPG perspective, it's like all of those gold embellishments that the guy was buried with, are those common jewelry or are they magical relics that he wielded in life?
Nice, Grandma. Nice. You always come up with the great stuff, though, Grandma.
Yeah. And mummified animals or even a mummified sphinx, that would be utterly terrifying. And yes, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a great a foe for players to go up against, or the characters rather to go up against. Typically, I've never seen more than one.
Of those things that's like, it's so earthy, that I don't want to use it unless I'm literally playing like a Wild West game, or maybe a superhero game, or if I'm playing an Earth game, I'd think about it. But otherwise, I'm like, I can just come up with something that's just as nasty. It's got more of an effect on us because we've heard the stories in real life of what the Wendigo is or was supposed to be. Whereas it
kind of feels like it's bound to the environment from whence it came, and it wouldn't feel right to use it in a TTRPG unless you're in a similar environment.
Right. Sure. If you're playing, South America, why is it here? Wouldn't it be just something else that ghouls and ghasts are often attributed to have been people who also were cannibals for whatever reason, and then they turn into that. Well, okay, I can take a regular ghoul or ghast and add 20-30 hit points, give them a little bit more damage, and scare the bejeebers out of the average first through third level party. They'll have nightmares of that character years later because they were fledgling adventurers and it scared the crap out of them, and it could have taken them all out, but they got lucky. And maybe it even got away, which is even better, which I can't stress enough. If you can let your monsters escape, there is nothing better than having a monster get away and them always worrying about when it's coming back. And you never tell them that some hunters from the next county over took it out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like, especially if it's an intelligent enemy and you're like, oh crap, he's plotting and scheming. He's going to kill me in my sleep someday, isn't he?
Grandma's got a good point here. What about Viking ship mound burials? I could definitely see an encounter where the party's up against a necromancer. The necromancer raises a mound of Viking warriors, but they're not just any Viking warriors. This necromancer did his homework. This necromancer went and found the wolf pelt or bear pelt berserkers. The ones that would wear those. From our werewolf episode a couple of nights back, or even 2 weeks ago. Bear pelt wearing berserker barbarian or even Vikings. I mean, mix a Crinosian werebear as a zombie or a skeleton and let it go to town.
And of course, when you're using Vikings, there's always the whole like he was buried with his favorite sword trope.
Yep, buried in his armor with his weapon. And now you've got this, berserking bear totem, zombie or skeleton coming at the party. What the heck do you do?
That is actually something that I've seen some games do to distinguish Draugr from run-of-the-mill undead, is that Draugr are reanimated warriors. They have all of the weapons and armor you would expect from a living warrior, except they're not living.
Yeah.
And in many cases, they actually have at least some semblance of the intellect that they had when they were living, so they actually know how to stab you to death with a sword properly.
And, the Flady's got a good point here. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds a lot like the skeleton warriors from, I think it was the Fiend Folio back in the day. They were the equivalent of fighter liches. And, when a fully armored skeletal, faces the party and they're like, piece of cake. And then they're, beating on it. And, it's got like 110 hit points and they're like scratching their heads. Like, why is this guy not going down? And then when they, disassemble him, he comes back up kind of thing. That's fun. Flady made a comment up here. Skeletal sea serpent. I never, it never goes, to show that, skeletons don't have to be just bipedal or your standard humanoid or whatnot. They can be, sea serpents. And, could you imagine going up against a skeletal basilisk, having the death stare,
That's
with,
an interesting idea.
Yeah. Actually, it wouldn't be a skeletal, it would be a zombie.
Comment? Can you bring up Flady's last comment?
This one here?
Yeah. Thanks, man. That's very flattering.
Yeah. I mean, if you could always, take the, you could always take the basilisk, keep its petrifying stare, but as a zombie, because it still has its eyes, it still has the the magic of its eyes, or even a Medusa. Could you imagine a ghastly Medusa? Not only is it it's no longer affected by its own petrification ray, because it's undead.
Not only that, but it may very well now have immunity to non-magic weapons and immunity to a lot of sleep and charm and hold spells.
Oh, a ghostly Medusa, that would be horrifying.
That would be. Or better yet, vampiric Medusa does not cast a reflection.
Okay, that'll really
sneaky as shit, dude. That's sneaky as shit. Wow.
You're welcome.
I mean,
You're welcome.
I've seen some examples people came up with that were pretty scary, but from the kaiju perspective, it's like, oh, hey, you're a necromancer. Oh, you only raised one skeleton. That's nice. And then he realizes that the skeleton is a 100-foot long snake.
I did that. I had a very high level evil cleric that I was playing way back. It was like 15th level or something like that. And I was able to actually animate some dinosaurs to make war machines. That was fun. Oh, Yeah,
And
because you just carry
I
armies inside them.
yeah, I've actually one of the books I always read around this time of year, actually multiple books I always try to read this time of year is the Dresden Files. Especially any of the Dresden Files that happen on Halloween, because there are so many really good stories for Halloween tales. And one of them is called Deadbeat, and in Deadbeat, it's all about necromancy. It's all about these necromancers that have come to town looking to become the next god of death. And I get a lot of really great ideas from that book on, like, okay, so my ghostly warriors are, they're Native Americans who died, during one of the wars or one of the purges, or, go to the Field Museum, find Sue, the T-Rex in Chicago, and turn it into a zombie or, a animated skeleton, go to town. So what you said there, having, dug up, fossils of dinosaurs or something and reanimating them, like, yeah, you absolutely could reanimate them, and it would still be an absolute terror on any encounter field. I don't know of many people who would be like, "Oh yeah, that's that's just a skeleton." No, that's not just a skeleton. That's a skeleton of a T-Rex. I am not sticking around because its teeth are still sharp. So,
yeah.
And this kind of got us into our next question: is what changes do you make for your favored undead? Like, do you give them statuses or status effects, auras? Do you affect or increase their stats of any kind, hit points, ability to hit? Do you give them damage resistance and such? Give me an example of how you've taken your favorite undead and made it far more than what the players were expecting. Shadow, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I like doing that with whites. They also have a level drain of 1, not super nasty, but you throw them in some good armor. Maybe give him a blade that extends the touch effect. And I've done that with a particular army. I had a bunch of white lieutenants that would, have a little bit more of their previous intellect and, go into towns and, just start doing their thing. And next thing you know, there goes another town. I had this really long campaign where it was literally like the North versus the South. There was a continent in the South that was just completely overrun with undead. And the Northern continent had no idea undead was a real thing. Hundreds and hundreds of years had gone by before, without anybody having encountered undead. They thought it was all, ghost stories and that sort of thing, to the point where even the priests didn't even really know how to turn undead anymore, and so that when the player characters started figuring it out what was going on and their priests were able to start turning undead, they became these great, legendary priests and heroes and what have you. And that ran on for a good long time. So I had to really come up with a lot of new, interesting ways to, keep it fresh with undead. One of the first things I did was the way they invaded was just putting a skeleton in a barrel and toss it in the ocean. Eventually it would land, and the skeleton would, once it started stop moving around, it was like, okay, unscrew the barrel, come out, and then, start infiltrating. And I would throw giant spiders in there, undead spiders and things like that. And eventually, it was so much fun. Undead are really, my favorite form of monster group to use, because you can literally turn anything into undead, and you can beef it up because of the power of the original magic user or priest or whatever that's making them undead. Probably has things up his sleeve that he can, cast a couple of spells on the average skeleton, and suddenly, it's a brand new thing, and they don't know what's going on. They think all skeletons are now going to start catching on fire and attacking you, or whatever.
Yeah. And that's actually really awesome thing to think about is having skeletons, and just coating them with something like alchemist fire or whatnot. The flames aren't hot enough to actually, turn the bones to powder, but it's hot enough to do damage to people who are still fleshy. I like that.
But
I'm gonna have to use that
I
one.
kind of alluded to it earlier with the whole necromancer spiel thing, is that the specific spell used to raise a being as an undead might have a side effect that does something other than making them undead.
Yeah,
Like,
they'll just a good old fashioned, some sort of like suicide bombers, skeletons. You kill them and they explode. Maybe it only does a D6 extra damage. In Arduin, I think Grandma was alluding to this before. There were these skeletons that were not really undead. There was this guy called Dirty Harry, who's a mage, and what he would do is he would wire them up so that they were basically skeleton robots. And then the priest's trying to turn them and they won't turn. All these other things. And then finally, when you smash to pieces, you see this little timer go tick, and then 3d6 fireball.
Well, I mean, one example I can think of is just magic fire. It's like the skeleton is now wreathed in flames, and any melee attacks they have do additional fire damage, because the spell that reanimated them also gave them this flaming aura.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Hell, even like the equivalent of like fairy fire, but put on them on purpose. Now you can see them in the woods. Just there's an army of glowing skeletons. The terror effect that's going to produce to the local populace, they're going to just hightail it out of there. They're going to leave everything, just head for the hills.
Well, just imagine that the sight of 100 flaming skeletons marching on your city. I mean, like even if
burning
they
the crops and everything as they go.
Yeah.
I mean, even you could do the flip side. The cold wielding undead, the undead that are so hell touched that their very touch brings the death of freezing.
Or a poison aura. There's a lot of options there.
Oh yeah. So well, what about you, Mart? Do you ever what changes do you make to your app to zombies? Let's say, like what changes do you normally give them?
I'm trying to remember the last time I actually did something that was a high difficulty zombie creature. Skeletons and ghosts, yes. Not so sure about zombies specifically.
Okay. Well, then what about ghost or?
I was going to add something. A real simple thing. A lot of undead, or let's go with undead. But this can work for other monsters. Is have them actually use the treasure that you randomly roll up. If you've got a decent monster with a decent, treasure table or whatever, and you roll up, a blade or even armor or anything.
Roll treasure when you spawn the enemy, and then when you describe him to the party, it's like, oh yeah, he's carrying a golden sword.
Yeah, simple stuff like that, or a wraith or a specter or a white or something like that. Equip him with whatever it is, and they got to work to get it. And not only work to get it, but it's working against them. So they'll know what it feels like to get stabbed with that sword that they might start walking around with later on. It's like, yeah, I had to tear this out of the hand of a white. Sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the same thing that I mentioned earlier with the whole mummies thing. It's like, that the mummy comes out of his coffin equipped with whatever he was buried in.
Exactly.
And that's, so let's, talk about maybe undead weaknesses. And, mummies have been brought up multiple times. And what if the wrappings of a mummy are there to keep the mummy from gaining power, from coming back? And what if, them breaking apart, breaking down or whatnot is what is allowing them to come back? Do you ever build in weaknesses in opposition to the strengths that you are, or abilities that you're giving your favorite undead. You ever, add in some kind of weakness or some kind of like linchpin for the party to be able to find and exploit. Mar, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Well, like the whole like flaming skeleton thing, water. You can make it so that they can put out the fire with water, and maybe have as a secondary thing is like putting out the fire actually breaks the spell that's reanimating the skeletons.
Yeah.
That's one of those like things is like people wouldn't necessarily think of that, but there is a kind of a logic to it anyways, where a player might actually logically deduce that would do something.
Okay.
The ghost one from earlier though actually had one of the weirdest weaknesses I've seen, because of the fact that the ghost actually couldn't leave the room because the ghost was bound to that magic well. So if you moved a certain distance away from the magic well, the ghost couldn't touch you.
Yeah, that's kind of a point I was going to touch on. Ghosts and wraiths and specters should have a very like Tolkien-esque weakness. Ghosts are ghosts for a reason, and it's sometimes not just because somebody killed them and they turned into a ghost. Maybe it's something else. Maybe they, because of depression or sadness or something like that, they sat there and starved to death or something like that, and that caused them to become a ghost or something like that.
You could go the ring with it, and the a ghost that's leading the undead army attacking your kingdom is the undead spirit of someone that your grandfather, well, he promised to marry her, but that didn't actually happen, and she ended up dying instead of getting married. And she has for the last however many decades been plotting her revenge while dead.
Mm-hmm. Or some sort of other connection to something or someone, or even a specific action would put them to rest. Maybe you don't have to actually like fight the thing. Maybe if you just do this one thing, pick up the freaking picture off the floor and put it back on the mantle where it belongs. They couldn't do it. Something dorky, not that's a dorky example, but something as simple as something like that. That's why they couldn't rest, because something needed to be done. And if you just do it for them, they're like, oh, thank you. Now I can leave. But they, maybe they can't tell you what it is, or maybe there's some sort of wrong that needs to be righted, and maybe you could hey, talk to the ghost and say, hey, oh, what's bugging you, because I do a lot of things with actual real life ghost hunters and paranormal people like that, and they tell me these things like sometimes there's some simple thing that's keeping them trapped here, and if you communicate with them or whatever, maybe you can say, oh, I'll do that for you, and help you get to rest. A buddy of mine had a sort of issue like that where the person couldn't rest for a reason, and they found out what the reason was, and it was because someone was being a cheapskate and didn't want to do this one thing, and so they said, well, I'll pay for it for you, and sure enough, maybe the thing will go away.
Yeah. Some of the weaknesses that I might, I kind of touch on it with the mummies is, the weakness is the bandages, or even, it could be the bandages, could be, them. They could be drawing the power from, runes that are sewn into the bandages. Yeah, an amulet or whatever. And you should make it obvious that there is something that the players can find or even exploit, especially if the players ask.
One of the weirdest ones I've seen was actually the idea that part of the reason why the mummies were wrapped like that was actually to protect their undead bodies from decay and decomposition, and that opening that up and causing them to start to fall apart. Well, I mean, that was their Achilles heel. You cut the
Right.
wrappings off, and it was the wrappings that were making them move.
Mm-hmm.
Vampires and
there's
liches have
multitude
a
of ways you can
similar
do that.
thing as well. Like with vampires, if you manage to find its last coffin, let's say, and you douse the dirt with holy water and stuff, they can't go back. You can just walk away, because come sundown or sunrise, they got to go back, and they can't go back. And all right, problem solved. Or with a lich, it's got the phylactery. If you can find the phylactery and smash it and destroy it, the lich is going, the bones are going to fall to the ground, and the lich is going to go to its eternal reward, so to speak, and problem solved. You don't necessarily always have to go and beat the creature into, dust to defeat it. Sometimes there's other, solution.
Yeah. So whatever the weakness of your undead is, if a player is looking for it, they should be able to find it. It might be difficult though. Don't make it just, oh yeah, what weaknesses does this thing have? And don't just give it to them. Make them earn it.
Investigation and perception rolls.
If you find the library, and you spend enough time in the lich's library, you're going to figure out, all of its, from all of its records and notes and things like that. Sometimes it's literally as simple as just reading the books or the notes left behind by, the big bad, that you can get the clues that you need.
I mean, one trope I've actually seen is the idea that as part of ensuring that the undead can never rebel and attack their master, the spell has built into it a kill word that, if uttered by anyone, not necessarily the person who actually raised the undead, if this kill word is uttered, the undead that were raised by that particular spell will immediately go back to rest. Of course, that's one of those things where it's like you have to find the diary of the necromancer who cast the spell in order to figure out what his particular kill word is.
What's up, Cal? What's up, Al? Welcome to the show, guys.
Yep. And sorry, Al. I know that the show wasn't set up hours or even days before. Life has been very full for me. And when I originally made this stream, it accidentally got set to private stream instead of public stream. So that's probably why you didn't find it. All right.
Yeah, that's right. One of the things I noted when we were getting started the second time is that I hadn't seen the upcoming stream notification. Because I guess the upcoming stream notification was also set to private or something.
Probably. Yeah. So again, my bad. Yes, I did turn off live reactions. I'm trying to be on the ball, but anyway. So let's talk about draining your players' resources when dealing with undead. And in this, I mean, what should the characters expect to have to dump in resources to be able to fight the undead that they're dealing with? It's monetary resources, rare ingredients, or limited amounts of one type of supply.
Not life levels or strength points.
No, like actual resources. Either they've got to dump a bunch of money on this one thing that they know is going to be a game changer in their combat, or they have to get a bunch of rare ingredients to put the restless soul back to sleep, or even they only have so much salt left in their trunk, and they can't block off every single entrance to a specific room. Instead, they have to make a small circle. Whatever the case might be.
The TV show Supernatural, lots of salt, lots of holy water, lots of crucifixes, that sort of thing. Sure, you can go that route.
How many silver bullets do you have that you haven't used up yet?
Yeah, I mean, So, I mean, like I
It's
said,
so
you know,
useful.
what kind of resources can the players expect, or amounts of resources in some cases? Like, what can they expect as reasonable to have to deal with some of your undead creations? Shadow, I'm going to start with you. Like, what do you?
In addition to the things I mentioned, the original player's handbook, for starting player equipment included things not just your holy symbols and your holy water, but they also had the good old fashioned garlic and wolfsbane. Those were always traditionally a thing to ward off certain critters, certain evil spirits and things like that. I would recommend that maybe change the names or come up with other things for different cultures and different places to make them your own. Maybe instead of it being salt, it's salt mixed with something else, and that's what this culture does, and maybe it works a little better. Um, there's like Six Nations said, silver, things like that, mirrors. Depending on how you want to run with it and how much you want to change it up. To and I wouldn't say that I would force the players or anything. I would just throw it out there as this is what the townsfolk does. They put these things on their doorways or what have you, and it seems to kind of work, but occasionally someone will go out at night, to borrow a cup of sugar, and next thing you know, they're never seen again, or you know that sort of thing. Just make it your own, whatever it is, as opposed to just wolves bane and garlic kind of thing, because that's very indicative of a certain part of the world, and other cultures are going to have completely different methods and superstitions and things like that, and maybe you come up with something really really weird, but it fits the flavor of your game or your game world, you know uh and make it an option. Don't tell them, oh, you need to buy 40 gallons of holy water. Well, no, you don't have to do that. You can take your chances.
Yeah. What about you, Mar? What kind of resources can your players expect to have to expend as characters fighting the undead?
Well, I mean, there's a whole variety of traditional like vampire and werewolf and whatever hunting things that might get used even on other kinds of undead. Like the whole thing with like the flaming skeletons, toss holy water on them and they just fall down. But Hyperborea is a great example because slingshots with silver bullets. Yeah, that's a thing in Hyperborea, and those are actually treated as blessed weapons. Not the slingshot itself, just the silver bullet.
Mhm.
But that logic means that that ghost encounter I mentioned earlier, the silver slingshot bullets actually worked on the thing.
Mhm.
Okay.
But that's one of those things.
Yeah,
It's like
I see that.
you're not necessarily going to be able to get the slingshot bullet back, and those aren't exactly free.
Yeah, but in a lot of games, they're actually really freaking cheap because it's like a silver piece each, maybe double that. To have someone melt it down in the right shape. If you have a mold of
Yeah,
whatever your bullet shape is, and it just so happens to be engraved with the holy symbol, so they get 2 for 1 every time they
yeah. I mean,
accept those
that's just
bullets.
an example, but yeah, it's like because you're it's not expensive for each one of them, but it's, quantity.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of other magic trinkets you can get though, like one time use spells that let
Candles.
someone who's not a cleric cast turn undead.
Yeah.
Like I was just thinking what Matt Thompson was thinking. In most of my games, even my fantasy games, they actually have developed gunpowder and things like that, and having silver actual bullets. Yeah, why not? They're not going to go very
Yeah.
far, but when you're shooting a vampire that's 8 feet away, or a werewolf or something like that, awesome.
Yeah. For
And
me, most
I mean,
times,
loading it into a musket would probably do more damage than using a handheld slingshot. So
Arquebus,
but
whatever your 10th level
my
allows.
players tend to, when they know they're going up against undead, they do their homework. They're like, okay, what kind of undead is this? And so they'll go to the wizard's library or wherever they can find someone with information. They're going to first find out what kind of undead they're dealing with, and then they're going to look at rituals. Typically, is what they've done in the past, and they're looking for rituals to quiet the undead or at least reduce their capability in some capacity. So then they're going to go gather the ingredients necessary during the day when the spirits are quiet, so that overnight they can cast the ritual to hopefully put down the undead. So it is a drain on monetary resources, but it's also a time limited thing for them. They may not have the time necessary to go get and gather everything before the ritual. And if they don't have everything, the ritual might become harder. So they can't necessarily put down all of the undead at once, but they can only limit their capabilities during the night. And that brings me to my next question: is what limitations do you impose upon a scenario, especially dealing with the undead, and in your tables? Do you limit it to just one little town? Do you limit it to just the evening hours? What kind of things, what kind of limitations do you impose on your scenario? Mar, I'm going to start with you on this one. And this is game master limitations. Like the limitations you put on yourself to stay within the thematic scenario.
I mean, like one very, very simple one is, it's like you're not going to have mummies in a European style crypt. That don't make sense. I mean, sure. That's sort of like aesthetic thing.
Well, I mean, if you're copying Earth, yeah, but otherwise, I don't get that.
Well, it's about the whole like aesthetic of the place that the characters are going into. Is like, what kind of Earth real world thing is it similar to? It's like, it's like if it's a civilization that was like really, really into preserved dead. Sure, you could have something akin to mummies pop out of what looks like a glossy wooden coffin, because hey, they juiced the dead body with who knows what before burying it. But it's all about the setting, I mean, and that for me is one of the big things, is like, what makes sense for the setting when choosing monsters? Because,
okay,
well, one of the things that occurred to me years ago, and that is something that kind of like stuck in my brain, is that the kind of monsters that a player encounters tells the player something about the area that they're fighting in, even if you don't directly explain why that monster is there. And having shambling nothing skeletons wandering around, say, a forest clearing is going to make the players curious.
Or should.
It's not necessarily a bad idea, but it's something that will catch someone's attention as being out of place.
Sure. What about you, Shadow? What kind of limitations do you impose either on your scenarios, yourself, or the monsters whenever you put together a undead story or session?
I like to start out small because, for the most part, unless I introduce the undead, at a later level. I like to seed the plot and storyline with them, early on, to give them the opportunity to cut them off at the pass. If they find a way to to disrupt the necromancer cult of some sort or whatever, or at least start getting on the trail a bit early on, it'll make their lives a lot easier later on down the road. They're not going to walk into a lich's lair at first level and spoil the whole scheme. But if they start thinking about it and doing the research, they by the time they're 7th, 9th level, something like that, maybe they've tracked down where they think the liches actually hold up, and as opposed to just it's somebody else's problem. We don't want to deal with undead. We didn't make a cleric. Nobody's running a cleric, so that's somebody else's problem. We're just gonna we're gonna go fight the orcs for a while, then go after the trolls.
That thing you said about having a level 1 party walk into the lair of the lich, who's the big boss, reminded me of that old meme about welcome to my home, said the spider to the fly.
Sure. But that's what dungeons and great dungeons are made of. This is where the bad guy lives, and he knows at some point people are going to come looking for him. So he's got traps, he's got guardians, he's got tricks, he's got runes and spells all over the place. The makings of a great classic dungeon, the Undead Necromancer Lich Vampire's Lair. That should be on everybody's bucket list.
I mean, and that's that's something else to think about is if your big bad, your primary boss monster is a necromancer, they're going to have a bunch of traps that affect primarily the living, because their minions aren't going to set off the traps, or if they do set them off, they're going to be unharmed by them. So your boss is your boss fight is going to be a slog just to get to, because even if they're like, oh yeah, the zombie stepped on the pressure plate and took an axe to the shoulder. Well, okay, so it's got one less arm. Still no less effective. Keep on going, zombie.
Or if you go back to that idea I mentioned earlier about a toxin that can turn the living to the undead, a trap in a hallway that releases that into the hallway. Well, I mean,
sure. I mean, you could even be an airborne toxin at that point. The person breathes it in, doesn't know that they have the undeath disease, and when they die, they become undead. Yes, T-virus. I kind of mentioned something like that.
The idea I was actually thinking of was necrogen.
No, necrogen. Okay.
Because it's literally just like a toxic chemical. It's not living in any sense of the word, but it causes your body to do weird things when it kills you.
So the limitations I normally put onto my scenario is I keep it regional. One, everything that's happening with the undead is happening in one particular region, or even sometimes a kingdom, if I go that big. And so the players can ride out and find out where the borders of this undead incursion is happening. They can actually go visit the physical limitations of where the undead are affecting. I also put time constraints on things. Generally, my undead excursions or scenarios happen in game world terms around the time where the veil between the afterlife and the material plane are the weakest. And a lot of people know that as Samhain or Halloween. And so there's a time limitation. They know the players will find out pretty early on that they have to prevent whatever is happening from happening at Halloween or the equivalent thereof at the witching hour. They know that they have X number of days until that happens. And after that, if they haven't completed their goal or haven't even gotten halfway to their goal, bad things are going to follow very rapidly, and it's going to be a very swift decline thereafter.
Like the idea of having a spell that takes an enormous amount of mana to cast. However, if it's cast at the right time, such as, midnight on Halloween, uh, it becomes far easier to cast because the world is just more receptive to it at that time.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the bad guy is going to cast it at that time. And if you don't stop him, you're going to have to deal with a greater evil.
Yep, absolutely. And it's not just, stopping the guy, it's finding out where the ritual is going to take place to begin with. Some of those rituals might take days to set up, it might take hours to set up. In many cases, when I've run this encounter or this type of encounter, generally speaking, it's in a large city, typically a metropolis. And the necromancers or necromancers, multiple in play, are going to do it in a more centralized location. They could be underground, they could be above ground, they could be 100 feet in the air, 200 feet in the air, whatever the case might be. And the ritual is not going to take a long time. It might take half a day to get set up and going. So the players have to locate where it's happening at before it actually takes place or before it ends, to avoid the really bad stuff from happening. And it's going to be a slog just to get there. So also things, other limitations that might come up in the scenario are things that disrupt player abilities or character abilities. Just because you've got a wizard in your party doesn't mean they can't be disrupted during casting. Having ghosts or hordes of zombies, falling upon them, when they're trying to cast magic to defend the party or even themselves, or even, wipe out huge sections, they're anything to make them lose concentration is going to have an effect. So, as a game master, disrupt your spellcasters, disrupt your characters.
There's also a lot to be said for the idea of having this clock ticking down in the background. It's like every time you take a long rest, the clock ticks. And
yep, absolutely.
So you don't want to take long rests unless you actually have to.
Yep. Just if you're awake, you can still act. If you're not awake, you can't act, and the clock ticks forward. Time limitations are definitely one of those ones that builds tension quickly. And some people might think, well, that's false tension. Well, it's not false tension. Okay, well, what if I let the clock tick forward, and what if I don't actually succeed? Okay, now you've got a new problem on your hand, and that'll be a problem for next session, and I will have all week to build the next session.
The necromancer who was menacing the city with an army of 100 zombies just cast a spell to raise every dead in the entire kingdom. And when I said every dead, I meant every dead, not just the humans.
Yeah. But have monsters that can disrupt things from even a distance. A player or a character who's using like a bow or a gun or something. This monster lets out a roar, like a fear effect, and it makes them take penalties on their ability to accurately aim at something that is barreling down at them. Like, I don't know, a zombie T-Rex. It comes barreling down the street at them, and your choices are aim at the giant, terrifying dinosaur from bygones past, or run in terror in hopefully a direction it can't turn in. Don't be afraid to disrupt your players, in the middle of their actions with a monster ability. It adds to the tension. Don't abuse it, don't overuse it, obviously. But if a monster has the ability to act in a scene, like they can do one interrupt action in a round, use it. So, I think that rounds out most of the questions I had on the common or, lesser undead. Does anybody else have any questions about how to make their undead encounters a little more challenging?
Well, here's one actually that
Sure.
I just thought of because of that thing I just typed into YouTube chat. Um, Sane skeletons. How much do you like the idea of using those?
Saying skeletons, so skeletons that can
Skeletons
think.
that have normal human faculties or something close to it.
I mean, they would be no different than a lich in that case, just maybe without the spellcasting ability. They'd have advanced tactics, obviously.
How about you,
Yes, minor
Shadow?
liches.
Well, I mean, because like they're turned into a lich-like state by an outside force that's not under their control, I guess.
Shadow, you're muted.
Sorry, I was just saying thanks, Flady.
Here. Any other questions for the evening? Let's see here. I'm just looking through chat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I said that thing that RPG Grandma said about a town with skeleton masks on everyone. Well, some of the Dragon Quest games actually had entire towns populated with skeletons who
Oh,
won't
interesting.
fight you because of the fact that they didn't want to be undead. They got hit with some sort of a curse that left them in this undead state. They can't have children,
Okay.
but they can, do menial tasks to help people who need help, I guess you'd say.
Interesting. Okay. Well, any undead scenarios? So as far as undead scenarios go, necromancers looking to complete a ritual to become the next god of death or undeath. You've got 3 necromancers working, in a large town, and they're trying to find the pieces of a ritual to put together and then they're all working against one another. They're not working with one another; they're working against one another. And the party is trying to stop all 3 groups from becoming the next, god of undeath. Use that as a scenario piece. And along the way, the party might find what the ritual is to, complete that undeath, god spell. And they have the choice of either using it or trying to destroy it, prevent it from being used.
I mean, like, there's the old magic circle thing. It's like, hey, we know where the magic circle is. What if we, make it not a circle anymore?
Yeah. What about you, Shadow? Do you have a suggestion for a undead scenario to throw at a party?
I like the I'm a big war gamer guy, so I really like the idea of the the invasion, the full on just we're going to do war. Okay, you guys could be the covert ops team if you want, or if you really want to do something different. I'm going to put you on a horse. You got your gear. You're going to be leading one of the charges, or maybe you're on foot, maybe you're an archer, whatever. But I want them to see just undead as far as the eye can see. The armies of so and so, who pulled up every undead from every neighboring county, city, state, etc., just massed at you, and let's do this. Let's have the the actual feeling of what it's like to be in the trenches or on the battlefield, not just you versus a couple of monsters, but just literally like a gauntlet. Let's see how many you can take out on your own. You're on a horse. Let's see how many you can take out until you are like, I got like 8 hit points. I'm gonna go back to camp. Just the most epic thing I can think of. I've always, as a player, wanted to literally be on the battlefield of a whether it's against orcs, undead, or whatever, just the whole sort of, Saving Private Ryan kind of feel. You're on the battlefield, you're there, and you may have other people, but your allies and whatnot, but they're worrying about themselves. You got to do what you can do and see how long you can do it for. So whatever it takes to get the campaign to that point, because I truly believe any good campaign is, like the Lord of the Rings, going to culminate in an actual war to finally settle the issue. You know what I mean? At some point, that's what it's going to take. If it's a really epic campaign, a really epic story, there's going to be a war. Now, maybe you guys are going to be doing the Frodo and Sam thing, but how many people can actually say their character was on the battlefield days, weeks, months at a time, doing the real brave, laying down their life for the good of everybody, and maybe actually walking away from it?
Yeah. What about you, Mar? Do you have a suggestion on a scenario that using undead?
There's a lot of ideas. I mean, a lot of ideas. But I mean, there's the
Give
old
me
one
one.
of a necromancer who's just building an army of the undead, and if you don't stop him, he'll take over the kingdom, and then the next kingdom after that, and stuff like that. I mean, it's a simple scenario, but it's an option. Then there's so many other weird ideas that I've seen over the years, like the thing I mentioned earlier. The whole thing was like the idea of a lich's castle having totems to enhance his powers. That's another scenario. It's like, having the heroes have as their actual main goal to break the totems that control the undead army. Because let's face it, they know that they're horrendously outnumbered, and trying to actually take on the undead army one-on-one is futile. So,
Now you're speaking to my inner barbarian. Yeah, let's break stuff.
So it's a stealth mission where you have to get inside the castle without fighting the army.
What is the stealth you speak of? You want me to go around breaking totems that are hanging on walls? I'm going to be a barbarian. I'm going to go break stuff.
Ripping the castle apart is kind of part of the plan, but you have to get inside the castle first.
Sure.
Crafting, that would be the first wave. That's the first wave that comes at you, is the undead fish and crows and insects.
Those are my spies. Yeah, those are my spies. My eyes and ears in a town is the undead animals.
I could see that, but as cannon fodder, why waste your skeletons when you've got an army of undead rats or dogs or cats or bunnies?
And also, when you go pet cemetery making undead animals, are people actually going to notice immediately?
Fair point. This is a really good idea, Al. Necromancer raises an entire town to farm food. Church hates it, sends the party in to exterminate it, even if 25% of the food population goes away, or food. Let's hear it. Even though it would kill 25% of the population because of lack of food. Yeah,
that's an amusing idea. Yeah.
I remember there being a story. Now it wasn't one of mine, but it was a story. I think it was on Reddit. Where an entire kingdom.
Oh, Nerdy, that's awesome. You win the chat tonight, Nerdy.
Undead cattle.
I actually did see a movie years ago about space vampires, where it's kind of like Firefly, except there are dozens of kinds of vampires in space, and you never know when one of them is going to sneak their way onto your ship.
Yeah, we did a 2-hour show, not last Saturday, but the Saturday before, on vampires in space. Last week we did Mother Loving Zombies on a Spaceship, and this week on Saturday we're going to do something else. I'm not sure exactly what. Yeah, Dracula 3000 was cool.
But yeah, so I mean, I've heard of one where a scenario where a king turned half of his kingdom, or raised half of his kingdom as undead, because a plague had ripped through his kingdom, killing about half to 2/3 of his people. So the king turned to necromancy to keep his kingdom running and keep his people fed. And the party was going through wiping out every undead, and every man, woman, and child in the city, because the cities were plagued with necromancy.
I've heard of this scenario before, because
Yep.
I remember the
I've
cruel
spoken on it
twist
a couple times.
at the end of it is that the party finds out that all of the people that they were killing for being undead wanted it.
Yep. Or they were already dead, and the kingdom needed bodies to work the fields. So when they finally get to the king at the end, the king doesn't even fight back. The king's like, "Well, congratulations, you win. The kingdom is destroyed. Wherever you're from can take all over what's left of my kingdom. I'm not even gonna fight you. Just go ahead and you win."
Because that's actually something that I've heard of in a few fictional settings, though, is that knowing that there is a necromancer who can revive you if you die, not everyone actually wants to go to the afterlife. Some people would rather live on as a zombie than to go to the afterlife. Like, sure, it's like you're not alive,
especially if they know a specific afterlife is waiting for them,
or just like the whole like Revenant thing, where you have unfinished business that you want to take care of before you go,
or they're a repentant soul and need additional time to turn towards the light.
But a key component of this, though, is the idea that you have reason to believe that you will actually be yourself and not just a mindless creature.
Yeah. So, all right, well, I think we've beat this undead horse to the point of no return. So I think it's time,
factory.
Russ. Yep, I think it's time we head on out of here. I do want to thank everyone for watching, and as always, tune in next week for more Gatekeepers. Shadow, who are you, and where can they find you?
It's just like it says in the name. Me and my boy doing father and son stuff when he's available. He's been pretty busy with school and JROTC, as you guys all know. But we're about to hit 700 subs. We're like 2 away. So if you guys haven't subbed, I'd appreciate, the look, see, and, helping us out. We're trying to, get to the 1,000, so we can, prove we've actually made a difference out there, helping you guys out with different crafts and hobby tips and reviews and all the stuff. You guys have watched the show before, but we'll probably be doing a craft tomorrow night, provided the boy doesn't have another after school activity. Otherwise, you can see me on Saturday night with the other Motley crew doing the shadow chat. We're going to be talking about some sort of undead in space again, just not sure which one, something like that. But
sure.
You guys all know. I know everybody in the chat. We've all hung out, forever, it seems.
All right, Mar, who are you, and where can they find you?
I'm MarHawkman on Twitch and YouTube. I do a variety of videos about things on YouTube. Some of them have nothing to do with TTRPGs. Some are related to TTRPGs in rather strange ways, like the video I did recently about looking at the plot of the movie Devil Girl from Mars, and looking at which aspects of it are important to pay attention to in context of using it as a TTRPG setting. Because let's face it, it's like that movie, when at first glance you're like, oh, that's nice, the Martians have ray guns. And then you hear the explanation that the Martian technology, what actually makes it superior to human technology, is that The Martians see space as a four-dimensional object, and humans don't. Oh, well.
Awesome. And I am Jade, and this is my Tabletop Tavern. I thank you all for watching. If you haven't done so, please consider subscribing to this channel, and the channel is linked in the video description below. And if you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, as it helps this channel grow and tells me that you're actually interested in the content we create. And with that, I bid you all a very good night.